Experts weigh in on the constitutionality of the second impeachment trial of Trump. What are the two arguments? This comes as Trump announces his new lawyers who will lead his defense. Biden has signed a flurry of executive orders and actions. There's 40 so far. The president just announced a plan to reverse Trump's spending cuts. And a group of Republican senators will pitch their own pandemic relief proposal to the president. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Since taking office, Biden has signed a record number of executive orders and actions. In his first 9 days in office, Biden has already signed 28 executive orders and another 12 actions. Biden's flurry of measures include reversals of some of the policies of his predecessor, such as halting funding for the construction of former President Trump's signature border wall and canceling the Keystone XL pipeline project that Trump revived after its axing by former President Barack Obama. Other orders include pandemic-related actions, such as imposing a mask mandate on federal property, reinstating travel restrictions on non-U.S. citizens traveling from Brazil, South Africa, and much of Europe, and ramping up government-wide coordination of the pandemic response. There's been growing calls of concern. Biden said last October that presidents who overuse executive orders are using the signs of dictators. He said, "We are a democracy," adding, "If you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator." Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell noted Biden's remarks. He said as recently as October, now President Biden said you can't legislate by executive action unless you are a dictator. While in 1 week, he signed more than 30 unilateral actions, adding, "And working Americans are getting short shrift." The New York Times editorial board, which endorsed Biden for president and lauded his win, called on Biden to ease up on the executive actions, arguing that this is no way to make law. The board argued the executive orders are a flawed substitute for legislation. Biden and his aides have defended the move. Biden called his latest executive actions an effort to undo the damage Trump has done, rather than initiating any new law. Biden says he's withdrawing a package of spending cuts proposed by Trump. Biden informed House Speaker Nancy Pelosi he is withdrawing 73 proposals totaling $27.4 billion in spending cuts. Trump had unveiled his spending cut packages less than a week before he was scheduled to leave office. The cuts were to be taken out of the widely criticized omnibus spending bill and the last virus relief package. Trump at the time said he was concerned about Congress's wasteful spending. The spending cut proposals were made by invoking the 1974 Impoundment Control Act. Under the act, if a president wants to spend less money than Congress provided for a particular program, he can seek congressional approval to rescind by sending a special message to Congress identifying the amount he proposes to rescind, the reasons for it, and the economic effects of the rescission. According to Trump's letter to Congress, he proposed the spending cuts so that more aid can go towards CCP virus economic stimulus. The cuts would affect 11 departments of the federal government, plus various federal programs. Congress's spending bill drew widespread scrutiny in December as lawmakers rushed to pass the measure to avert a shutdown. The more than 5,500-page bill passed both houses of Congress to the dismay of some lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. They said they didn't have sufficient time to read the bill. The package includes a $1.4 trillion omnibus bill that will fund defense spending and domestic programs and $900 billion in COVID-19 pandemic relief. Trump and others heavily criticized the bill, citing wasteful items and unnecessary spending, such as sending hundreds of millions of dollars overseas for foreign aid and funding domestic programs for entities that are not even open for business. And a group of GOP senators will pitch their own pandemic relief proposal to the president. They'll meet with President Biden at the White House to discuss. According to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, Biden on Sunday invited the group of 10 senators to meet with him for a full exchange of views. Biden says he wants their support, but a deal has to pass no ifs, ands, or buts. The senators requested an opportunity to discuss the path forward on the nation's 6th pandemic relief package. They say their proposal builds on previous relief bills that received bipartisan support. They wrote, "Our proposal reflects many of your stated priorities, and with your support, we believe that this plan could be approved quickly by Congress with bipartisan support." They went on to say, "We request the opportunity to meet with you to discuss our proposal in greater detail and how we can work together to meet the needs of the American people during this persistent pandemic." The senators say their proposal is targeted to those who need it most. The director of the National Economic Council says Biden's team are open to input and constructive ideas from anywhere. On Fox News Sunday, one of the lawmakers, Senator Bill Cassidy, said the proposal is about $600 billion, around one-third of Biden's $1.9 trillion package. They say it includes economic relief for Americans who make under a certain amount, including their dependent children and adults. It also has enhanced federal unemployment payments at the current level and nutrition assistance for struggling families, among other measures. The letter notes billions of dollars remain unspent from the previous COVID relief packages, including from the CARES Act passed last March, which also has yet to be exhausted. And there is some bipartisan pushback against Biden's nearly $2 trillion proposal. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia said earlier this month he'd prefer stimulus checks be sent to those with the highest need. He said he's frustrated with Vice President Kamala Harris, who went to his home state this weekend to promote Biden's proposal. He says no one contacted him beforehand and that that's not a way of working together. Senator Bernie Sanders says he thinks Democrats already have the votes to pass the bill without bipartisan support. Now let's turn to the impeachment trial. Trump has named the 2 new attorneys who will now lead his impeachment defense legal team. The news comes after the departure of an earlier group. The 2 lawyers who will represent the former president in the Senate trial are David Schoen and Bruce Castor Jr. Schoen is an attorney from Alabama, and Castor is a former prosecutor in Pennsylvania. This comes a day after media reports said an earlier group of attorneys from South Carolina were no longer participating in the defense. The report says South Carolina-based lawyers Butch Bowers had previously been tapped to lead the president's legal team, but left over differing opinions on the direction of the defense arguments. The new team has about 1 week to strategize. Opening arguments are scheduled to begin the week of February 8th. The Democrat-controlled House voted 232 to 197 to impeach Trump on a single article of impeachment. It alleges that the president incited an insurrection that caused the U.S. Capitol breach on January 6th. The impeachment was completed in a single 7-hour session and has been criticized by Republicans for its speed and lack of due process. Castor says the upcoming trial could test the strength of the Constitution. Now, there's been debate among experts as to the constitutionality of the impeachment trial. Senator Rand Paul had raised the issue earlier last week, forcing the Senate chamber to take a stance on whether or not it's constitutional to hold the proceedings. The vote was 55 to 45, indicating the trial will go ahead, but it also revealed nearly half of the chamber is of the view the proceedings are unconstitutional. Paul argued in an op-ed, if Chief Justice Roberts isn't presiding over the trial, it's not valid. He wrote, "If Justice Roberts is not presiding over this, then it is not impeachment. This charade will be nothing more than bitter partisanship and political theater." Chief Justice John Roberts has said he will not preside over the impeachment trial. Instead, Senator Patrick Leahy, as president pro tempore in the Senate, will preside instead. The scholars who argue it's unconstitutional are relying on an interpretation of Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, which states the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. According to one reading of the text, these scholars say impeachment is for current office holders. And since Trump had already left office, the Senate's jurisdiction or authority to hold an impeachment trial expired on January 20th, when his term came to an end. Chairman of the Board of Directors at the Cato Institute, Robert A. Levy, explained the interpretation. He said in a blog post, if Trump was still in office, he would be subjected to impeachment and conviction, according to Article 2. But since his term has ended, even though he was impeached, he is no longer subjected to conviction. That's one reading. What's another? Legal scholars and many Senate Democrats argue that former office holders are still subject to the impeachment power after leaving office. That's because the Constitution permits the punishment of disqualification after being removed. These scholars are relying on Article 1, Section 3, which states judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. A group of constitutional law scholars argue that due to Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution, there's two aspects to impeachment power. They wrote in a letter, the first is removal from office, which occurs automatically upon the conviction of a current officer. The second is disqualification from holding future office, which occurs in those cases where the Senate deems disqualification appropriate in light of the conduct for which the impeached person was convicted. They added the impeachment power must be read so as to give full effect to both aspects of this power. The Democrat-controlled House on January 13th voted 232 to 197 to impeach Trump on a single article of impeachment. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is going ahead with the impeachment trial. The 55 to 45 vote for Paul's order suggests a Trump conviction is unlikely. That's because a two-thirds majority is needed to convict. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.